Hi everyone, and welcome to Cognitive Development Across the Lifespan. This is Unit 3, Mod 3.4. Here are your learning objectives, here are your vocab. Cognitive development, so the way people think, what they know, the way they communicate what they know. Jean Piaget in Paris, France in the 1920s studied how children think, and he noticed that children think differently than adults. And one of the things he said is that we develop, as we are learning and thinking as young people, we develop schemas. Schemas are like cubbies. They are these cubby holes that help us interpret info. So we might have a schema for a cat. So cats have 4 legs, they have ears, they have a tail, they are furry, right? So it's what I know about the concept of a cat, and it's my little cubby hole. It's my little schema for a cat. Now, when we learn new information, we either assimilate that information into an existing schema, or we accommodate. We need to maybe create a new cubby, a new schema, or change an existing one. So if we're assimilating, we see this little pug out here, right? This kid has never seen this pug before, never seen a dog like a pug. And they're like, hey, I already have a schema for dogs. Dogs have 4 legs. This is my dog. I know what that is. I already have this cubby established. Assimilating would be like, this is a dog, okay? This thing has 4 legs. It's going in my cubby for dog. Over here, we're accommodating. We have our existing schema of a dog. They see a cat, and instead of putting the cat into the dog cubby, they're like, wait a minute, this also has 4 paws, but it's different. This is a cat. A cat's meow. And so accommodating is creating that new schema for a cat. So this is a confusing pair. So you're either assimilating new information or accommodating. Next, we're going to go into the 4 stages of cognitive development that Piaget created. So he is a stage theorist. When we were talking about themes in developmental psychology, one of them was continuous or stage, right? Do things happen in a continuous way or a stage way? So here are our 4 stages that I'm going to go over. They're connected to ages, and they each have they each have 1 or more milestone things that it's important to note. And here is our mnemonic: some pigs can fly. So S for sensory motor, P pre-operational, concrete can, formal fly. All right, so if you want, you don't have to write this chart down, but you can if you want to. I'm going to go through all of them. First, sensory motor. 0 to 2 years old, child takes in everything through their senses: what they see, what they hear, what they touch, what they move their body, the motor movement of their body. They can kick something, it makes a sound. One of the key milestones they're developing is object permanence. So the awareness that the object still exists even when I can't see it anymore. Mom took the toy, put it in the cubby, closed the cubby door. It's still there. I know it's right there, Mom. That is object permanence. Children develop this in the sensory motor stage, Piaget found, but it does happen earlier than Piaget thought. It happens by 8 months. So before 6 months, children tend not to have object permanence, but by 8 months they do. And here's just a little note about how developmental psychologists think that these things happen more continuously, more gradually. So pause there if you want to look more into that. Next stage is pre-operational. So 2 to about 7 years old, and they're using language now as a symbol for what they want. I say apple. It means I want a real apple, Mom, right? But they're not able to think in a reasonable way. They're not able to think logically. So one of the things that they're learning is the law of conservation. So here we have, they don't have it though, I'm sorry. So one of the ways we test this is there's 2 glasses here of water, right? You say, hey, are these the same? Once they say yes, cool. Take one of the glasses, pour it into this tall, skinny glass. Now, which has more, or do they both have the same? If the child points at the tall, skinny one and says, this one has more because it's taller, they lack conservation. They don't understand that just because it changed shape, it didn't change how much mass exists. So this is typical, he said, and it has nothing to do with how intelligent or not intelligent this child is. It's just that kids think differently in how they perceive the world. Another important thing they're doing is symbolic thinking. They are using dolls to represent the world, or they're using language to represent the world. They're not playing with each other as well yet, but they play next to each other. They mimic each other, right? They're trying to follow each other. So these are all important parts of this stage of thinking. Here are more examples of the law of conservation test. You could do it with Play-Doh or with pennies. One other important way that kids think differently in pre-operational stage is they are egocentric. And this is not the same as egotistical. Egocentric means they are unable to perceive things from another person's point of view. So example here, she's holding up 2 matching cards saying, look, Granddaddy, I have a match. But this is his perspective. We can't see what the match is, right? So from her perspective, hey, look, I got a match. Can't you see? Isn't this exciting? But he can't see it. So she has an inability to take on the idea that, hey, if I hold it this way, he can't see it. Because whatever I can see, my granddaddy can see. Another way we test this, actually, let me go into, so what they're trying to develop when they're egocentric is they're working on developing a theory of mind. And so egocentric and theory of mind are kind of the opposites of each other, right? Theory of mind is our ability to know what someone else knows, to know what we know and to know what someone else knows different from us, right? How they might feel, what they might know or not know. So best way to explain this is an example. So you have this box of Smarties. What do you think's in the box? Smarties. Open the box. Pencils are in it. Huh, silly. Okay, let's close it up. Bring your friend Jenny in. What is Jenny going to think is in this box? If they say pencils, because they know there's pencils in the box, they are egocentric. If they say Smarties, they have theory of mind. They're like, I know that there's pencils in here, but it says Smarties, and she doesn't know. She hasn't opened this box yet. She's going to think there's Smarties in this box. So this is a way we test theory of mind. And so here's some more info on that. Pretend play is a really good way that kids kind of develop theory of mind, because they're imagining, oh, this little doll got hurt, right? Needs to go to the doctor. How does the doll feel, right? Things like that. Next stage, concrete operational. So we're up to some pigs can, concrete operational. Now kids can think logically. They can make reasonable deductions. They can think in an inductive way. So for example, we're reacting to this cat where our nose is getting itchy, we're sneezing, our skin is itchy. Oh, here's a specific event. I can generalize that to say, I think I'm allergic to cats, right? They begin here. This is where they grasp the law of conservation. Oh, the taller one has the same amount. You just change the shape of it. In formal operations, now the child can think abstractly. They can think hypothetically. They can think, if this, then that. They can think about their own thinking. They can think about hypotheticals, and they can think about, like, what's the probability of something given some information and tools to predict likely outcomes of things. So today we look at Piaget and we say he was right about kind of the order of things developing, but what he was wrong about is that it doesn't happen in a clear stage. Like at this age, there's this boom of cognitive development. They're saying it's more continuous, and you can read more about that here. So how do we help kids in their thinking? Lev Vygotsky, a Russian psychologist, said that it's all about the zone of proximal development. There's what I already know, and here is what's well beyond my reach, and the zone is like the sweet spot for learning. And it's all about the social interactions with other people that how we learn. So for example, doesn't know how to cook at all, maybe knows how to peel an orange. Okay. That's what I can do on my own. I want to learn how to cook. We're not going to start with this person is going to make an omelet. Okay. We're going to start with let's make toast. Let's learn how to use the toaster. Let's learn how to butter bread. You don't know how to do that yet, so you need my help, but it's something you can do with help. So it's about this social conversation, this way of, it develops their thinking, and it's about the appropriate scaffolding. You go from, learning how to pedal to training wheels to riding the bike without, right? Also in terms of our thinking, it is how do we think about right and wrong? And so Jonathan Haidt thinks we have a moral intuition. It's like a gut instinct that's automatic, that's that mammalian brain, and not so much our rational brain. One example he has of this is if we have the runaway trolley headed for 5 people. All will be killed unless you throw a switch that diverts the trolley. It's going to kill 1 person and save the 5. Most people will say, yes, throw the switch, save the 5, 1 will die. Thinking rationally. But if we give the same scenario, and now instead of the switch and the 2 tracks, so you have to physically push this person with good physical push, right? Not like throwing a switch onto the tracks, which will kill that person, but it will save the 5. Most people change their answer. They say, no, I will not do that. So this kind of gives evidence to, he says, that idea that there are these moral intuitions, these gut reactions. We also look at reactions about like our emotions based on if we're holding something warm, we tend to think warmly of the person. If we are tasting something that is disgusting, we are more disgusted about certain moral digressions than we are if we are not tasting something disgusting. So he says there's a lot more to this than just like rational, logical thinking. But we can override this automatic thing just as we can our mammalian brain in other situations, right? Like that fight or flight. Here's just an interesting excerpt from the textbook about punishment and more to what Jonathan Haidt's talking about. And so how can we encourage moral action in people? So we know that social influences play a role in morality. We know that environment matters, to say it another way. We know that you can take morally good people that were considered morally good by their neighbors, by their coworkers, etc., and put them in a situation, and corrupt, evil, horrible atrocities can happen, and they can be part of them. So how do we teach the positive? How do we teach empathy? How do we teach social responsibility? Providing moral action, providing, let's say, service learning opportunities, encourages kids to, and then adults to be to take moral action. So you might get a service requirement, but you might actually end up wanting to continue service because of the service requirement that you've had to do. So moral action feeds a positive, empathic, moral attitude. There's also connection here, not only with these different outcomes, but also with delayed gratification, that it can improve delayed gratification. There's a famous study, marshmallow test. You get 1 marshmallow, I'm going to leave the room for X amount of minutes. If you don't eat the marshmallow, by the time I come back, you get 2 marshmallows. But if you eat the one, right? And so the person leaves the room. The kids that delayed gratification in longitudinal studies, it was shown that they had higher college completion rates, higher incomes. They were less likely to develop an addiction problem. There are some criticisms of this study in that the replication doesn't show the strength that the original study showed. And there's some other contributing factors, perhaps, such as privilege or other social dynamics. Okay, so still in cognitive thinking, but now let's look at older adults. So when we look at teens and young adults, they can surpass 70-year-olds in perspective memory, thinking ahead. I have to do this thing at this time or this day. Time-based tasks become more difficult for older adults, but there is not a lot of decline in recognition. So you might just need a little cue to remember to do that thing, or you might need a little cue to remember that word. This was a number of words study remembered. So they do great when it comes to recognition, right? If it's there in front of me, I have to just know which one. If it's not there at all, I have to pull it out of my brain totally with no cue. That becomes harder for 70 plus years old. The more something is actually meaningful to the person, though, they will be more likely to remember it. If it was meaningless, the older you are, the easier you forget it because it was meaningless. There's a whole bunch of things out there that like encourage people to buy this program. It's going to help your memory. And so when you're old, you're not going to have dementia or Alzheimer's. And they got sued because yes, playing a game can improve your memory. It can improve your ability to do things. What it improves your memory and ability to do is the task it's doing. If you're playing a game like a matching game, you're going to get better at the matching game. You're not going to get better at remembering to do your taxes when you're supposed to. You're not going to get better at driving. You're not going to get better at remembering the things you need to remember. Like, it's only good for the thing that it's actually teaching. So there was a big lawsuit there. When we look at dementia, this is an umbrella term. There are different types of dementia, but it's a particular cognitive disorder. This is not what everyone experiences. The numbers are growing, but this is not the typical development in 70 plus years old. When we look at a 70-year-old, a 20-year-old, a 50-year-old, it's not as much age that can make a difference with your memory and ability to do an intelligence test. It is how close the person is to their natural death. Meaning if this person is going to die in the next 1 to 3 years, you're going to see a stronger cognitive decline. Regardless of age. So takeaways, remember the difference between assimilate, accommodate, the 4 stages. Some pigs can fly is our mnemonic. Remember that moral action helps build moral attitudes and that we can override that automatic gut instinct, that moral intuitive think with rational thought, but it is our gut automatic instinct.